Conversations. How are you, Elizabeth? You were on my show about 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Go figure. And we had a great conversation. I appreciate you coming back on.
Well, thanks for having me, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's talk about, we talked about how important it is to have courageous conversations. First, define that for me.
Courageous Conversations really is about stepping out of your own comfort zone and being a little bit vulnerable and inviting people into conversation. So that means really it's about, excuse me, allowing other people to speak and to understand them first without judgment. So you need to move that kind of stuff out of the way, and your quick solutions that you might have 20 of them to give to that person, moving all that stuff out of the way and really being curiously engaged about what they have to say.
Way to move the needle in so many ways. And what do you think is the biggest challenge for people not to have those conversations with people?
Well, most of it really is about, oh, well, that person's just like that. They'll be okay, or no, don't worry about it. And we don't take the time to find out what's really going underneath people's behavior.
Right. And if you don't, it,
Being curiously engaged, right? Just
right.
stepping and
You're
saying,
you're
hey,
you're walking away from certain things that you wouldn't have walked away from before.
that's right.
Right. And it's important because what happens if we don't have that courageous conversation?
Well, then things fall apart. So in the space of families, there's a real disconnect with teenagers and their parents. Kids are going through tremendous things these days. They're heavily weighted inside their brain and their body, and they're making choices that aren't always the best. And so if parents don't have the opportunity or the gifts or skills or talents to have those conversations with their kids, then chances are great poor choices are going to exist. And that could be as serious as suicide, because we know that suicide is the second cause of death of teens in North America. And we need to be responsible for standing up and doing something about that.
Right. And if we aren't, it's going to continue to happen. And then you learn things from having a conversation with people, with your kids, and saying, and really asking those hard questions so that you can identify the problem before it's too late.
Absolutely. And if we don't do that now, then what ends up happening is those kids become adults. They go into workplaces, and we know that toxic workplaces exist. And so, bullying is rampant. Mental health concerns are through the roof. Social isolation is on the increase. Absenteeism in workspaces. Sometimes people are there, but they're absent. And so if we don't engage in those kinds of conversations, people don't have the skills or strategies to be able to be resilient or to make a difference or voice their opinion because they don't feel like anybody listens to them or they're not valued. And then what happens is that cycle then returns home. So that then, one of two things would typically happen there where, families would be excited to see their parent and so on. And
Right.
so that encourages the parent to go back to work. But the other thing that could happen is if that person goes home and they're disgruntled because they don't feel like they're valued or they don't feel like they're listened to in their workplace, then domestic violence increases, alcoholism or drug abuse or so on. And then that family is left in that wake. So
So a lot
that's
of times the kids can identify the problems they're going in the home life for somebody too, especially if you're a teacher, counselor, to have that courageous conversation that you might be afraid to have, or
absolutely.
a neighbor or somebody.
Yep.
What's going on? What's wrong? And you could identify it before it's too late.
Yes.
And you're teaching people to do this for, first of all, to save people, to help them through that process. But what is that overall reason why you use the word courageous conversation?
Because we don't have the courage to be able to step into some of them sometimes. And so if we look at our communities, if we look at our politics, no matter what country we're in, and really around the world, we are so incredibly positional that we're not willing to listen. It seems to be a lost art. We're just set on the way we think things are, and our perspective is only a perspective. It's not.
You should hear both sides to something, understand that other person's side, understand why they think that, and not be so closed-minded not to listen to them. And
Right.
those conversations could be with a spouse, that could be with anyone. That if you didn't have that conversation, it could mean really bad things later on, because a lot of times we hold things in that that's gonna happen to you that you just have no idea, because you're constantly focusing on yourself and not everybody else around your environment,
Right.
and listening.
Yeah.
Like the listening skills is a big problem for us, right? Well, once we are, you know, you know, building that courage to have that conversation, if we don't even do that, we don't listen to what people are saying, what happens to us?
Well, the disconnect happens, right? And loneliness and hopelessness and desperation. And in some cases, if people feel like they can't connect with anybody, then they choose, in some cases, a permanent solution to what might be a temporary problem.
Wow. It's very, very interesting how you're identifying this problem and trying to fix that. How do you help people with this? Tell us about that.
Well, I help them by, you know, coaching and walking alongside and listening to what's going on for them and the challenges and the struggles that they are having, and being able to provide them with opportunities that might be different than what they've thought of. Because we don't know everything. And so, this is a chance to be able to have connection with folks and guide them along and just give them other alternatives to the way things are for them.
How do you coach people? Who do you coach? Who are you looking to coach?
Well, I coach parents from time to time. So I'm, meeting with some folks at the end of this month and doing that kind of work. And I also do it. I'm trying to get into more business and industry to have similar kinds of conversations there, to create more positive environments.
The work-life balance is a big thing that employers don't understand with their employees, and then vice versa. There's not a connect between that manager or that supervisor or the team in general.
That's why we need connection. That's why we need conversation so we can understand that and then work together as a team rather than working as individuals and hoping like heck that, something works.
And when it won't work, what tip do you offer people to have that courageous conversation? Do they prepare themselves in a certain way to ready to talk to somebody about that because they're afraid what the response will be?
Well, and that's why I call it courageous, because sometimes you need to be able to step forward and say, I need some help with this, or, this, I've noticed that, you're not looking yourself these days at work and your productivity is a bit lower. Please tell me about it, right? Where I'm not expecting people to be therapists, but what I am hopeful of is that they can reach out and bring people into conversation to see if there are ways to help support, so that whether the environment is at home or with your partner or in a workplace or in the community, in an ice rink or a soccer field, wherever, that it's an opportunity for us to start reconnecting.
All right. You have an offer for our listeners and viewers. What is that offer?
The offer is to check out my website at courageousnetwork.com, and you can pick up the gift that I have there. So it's 5 strategies of dedicated listening. And then let's get on a call and I can help you through some things, either in your workplace or your family.
All right. Thanks again. Appreciate it. All
Thanks,
right.
Neil.
You're listening and watching the Neil Haley